Zygmunt was always talking about the idea that one needed to develop real methods. And so at that time, I had come back to Chicago, so this was about 2 years after my PhD, and Guido and Mary Weiss were still in Chicago. They had gotten their degrees, but they were teaching at DePaul University. And the three of us would meet often with Zygmunt and sit in his office for an hour or two and chat. And Zygmunt said there is this interesting problem. So you have to go back a little bit. So when Zygmunt had Calderon as a student about 9 years before, and one of the results that Calderon obtained in his thesis, which is quite remarkable, is a partial extension of the one complex variable thing to higher dimensions, the theorem of which had been proved in one direction by Lucene and in the other direction by Don Spencer. And it was the following theorem, that if you have a holomorphic function in the unit disk, and you ask the question is, does it have non-tangential limits at points on the boundary? That's one question. And the other question is what's called the area integral of Lucene finite at almost every point of that set? And it turns out that the sets at which the non-tangential limit existed and the area integrals are finite are almost everywhere the same. This is a remarkable theorem proved in one direction by Lucene and in the other direction by Spencer. And typically, this is the use of complex methods, and there's a sort of a star shape. There's a jagged kind of domain, and you use conformal mappings. You use the whole machinery. So a fascinating problem for Zygmunt had been, what's the higher dimensional real analog? And he had given this problem to Calderon in 1950, and Calderon had solved half of it, and that was partly in his thesis. That was the direction that if you had a harmonic function in the upper half space and it had non-tangential limits on a certain set, on the boundary, then almost everywhere the corresponding area integral was finite. And so Zygmunt said, well, there's the proof of the converse, which will need entirely new ideas. So we talked about it for a while. And so after a while, it occurred to me that maybe it does not really need such new ideas. Maybe I can do it. Yeah. So at one of these meetings, I said, well, I think this can be done. And I sort of outlined very vaguely a project of how it could be done. And Zygmunt said, no. This is going to be done by some person who has really new ideas. Okay, so we left it at that. Now, this was March of 1959. Yeah. So Ellie and I were going to be married in New York 2 weeks later. Yeah. Okay. And so I was going to travel to New York. We were going to get married in New York, have a small little wedding. Just family. And then we were going to make a little honeymoon trip. And then I would come back to Chicago because this was in the break between the two quarters. And she would go back. She had another semester of teaching to do. She was teaching school. Then later she would join me. And since I was going to be flying back to New York for this, Guido and Mary were going to borrow my car. I had a 1956 Chevrolet. They didn't have a car, and they wanted to take a trip. They were going to go to Virginia or something, and they were good friends. They went off. Got married. Even though I was on my honeymoon, I couldn't stop thinking about the problem. It wasn't as it turned out, I had the right idea, but there was one point that I didn't see, and one day, among all the other things, it clicked. Yes. And so when I came back to Chicago, I was also, of course, very happy about how things had gone, but I had this nice theorem now. I met Guido and Mary because they were going to give me back my car. And then they said to me, have you heard? Have you heard? They were very upset. He said, have you heard? Well, Zygmunt had gone off during that week. Zygmunt had gone to visit Calderon.
Yeah.
Calderon was then still at MIT.
Yeah.
He said, have you heard? Calderon has proved this result.
Yeah.
And Zygmunt had talked to him, and
Yeah.
Calderon had proved it.
Yeah.
And they were very upset that Zygmunt had talked. And
Yeah.
I was very upset too. And anyway, so when I met Zygmunt, I don't know, I didn't control myself very well, and I got quite angry with him. I mean, I'd never had such a
Confrontation with.
right with him or
Yeah.
almost any other mathematician. But then within a week or so, we patched it up, and we never spoke about it again.
Yeah.
Of course, Calderon, when he found out about it, because he was an innocent party in this, he didn't know very much about it. I think what happened is that the fact that I talked to Zygmunt and I
Yes.
expressed some feelings about it, he then told Calderon, and Calderon had a solution to the problem, which technically was different from mine.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was in the same mindset. But he was innocent. And he was very nice about it because he told me, he contacted me on his own and he said, oh, never mind, I'm going to withdraw. I mean, I have no role in this. So anyway, and Zygmunt and I patched it up. I mean, I went to Zygmunt and I said, I'm sorry I spoke so harshly to you. And we never talked about it again.
Can I ask, what did he say at the time? I must say, I haven't been on the receiving end of a confrontation like that. I wonder what it's like.
He was sort of shocked that I talked to him like that. I mean, I think that's what I remember. He didn't try to say, well, I didn't say anything or anything like that. He just sort of, you know, I mean, you know, I had never, you know, I was always very respectful. You know, I held him in very high regard, and I was always deferential to his opinions. But in this thing, I felt he had betrayed me in a way. After about a few days, I called him up and I said I would like to come and talk to him. And I went to his apartment and he offered me tea and we chatted. But we didn't chat about it directly, and that was it. And I think, you know, he did not mean any harm. What I resented was his feeling that I was not good enough to solve. I mean, he didn't say that.
I see, right.
That I somehow, when I originally presented the idea, okay, maybe it's not so great. I mean, it was a twist on older ideas. I can explain what it is, but maybe it's not so important. But that he felt that, you know, I wouldn't be able to do it. This became a little part of our collaboration on HP. So it was, everything worked out.
No, I remember learning these things from you in
the end, everything worked out well.
I mean, these things, the mathematics, not the human element. That
well, even that worked out well. No, I have very fond memories of Zygmunt.